Hey co-stars, welcome to another Star Trek video on the Generation Films channel. My name is British Ben and today we are going to look at one of the most elegant Starfleet vessels. No, editor, it's not the Sovereign class. Think more like older. No, think more sort of like antique, sailing boat, champagne breaking across the bow type elegance. Ah yes, the Excelsior Class, a ship so sophisticated and posh that it even has a dedicated table for cups of tea. So without further ado, this is 10 features of the Excelsior Class in Star Trek. Number 1, Origins. So in the early 23rd century, Starfleet consisted mainly of Miranda, Constitution, and Oberth class ships. Oberth class. Hey, just for fun, let's show a clip of an Oberth class being blown up. Yeah, that never gets old. Anyway, the Excelsior class was meant to surpass the Constitution class with greater firepower and faster speeds. So in 2258, the Excelsior class project began, and it took Starfleet 10 years to settle upon a space frame design. The prototype, the Excelsior, was built at San Francisco Fleet Yard's orbiting Earth and in 2272 started trials. The ship achieved Warp 9.4 in testing, outrunning its Miranda-class escorts, and this was because of the new Transwarp Drive. However, bear in mind that Warp 9 in the old scale was about 729 times the speed of light, whereas in the updated next generation scale, it was about 1500 times the speed of light. So it was fast for the time, but it still wasn't as fast as the Enterprise D and Enterprise E, etc. So production started in the year 2283 and it ran into the 24th century. Now, there aren't any on-screen canon references for this, but apparently about 125 Excelsior class ships were built, and these include later models with refits and upgrades. Now, before we go into the next section, if you aren't satisfied with just hearing about Starfleet ships and you actually want to build and command your own fleet, I can recommend the free mobile game for iOS and Android, Star Trek Fleet Command. It features all of your favorite characters and ships from the movies, The Next Generation, J.J. Abrams era, and many other Star Trek shows. You operate from your base space station where you build your fleet and embark on missions. The game has monthly updates that keep the story engaging, and you can join alliances with your friends, upgrade your ships and station to maximize your resources and unlock your perfect ship model as you progress through the game. A big thank you to Star Trek Fleet Command for sponsoring this episode. Star Trek Fleet Command is free to play on iOS and Android, and you can use my link below to download the game. Number 2, Dimensions. According to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine technical manual, the Excelsior class is 511 meters long and it has 34 decks, supposedly. Although this is Star Trek, so they usually mess that up. Like, for example, the Constitution class is supposed to have 21 decks, but then this happens in Star Trek The Final Frontier. And isn't deck 1 supposed to be at the top and it increases in number as you go down? Anyway, back to the Excelsior class. So here's how they mess up the decks. So deflector control is where Kirk goes to heroically save the ship from the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. And Sulu's daughter at the helm tells Kirk where it is.
Where are the deflector relays?
Deck 15, section 21 Alpha.
But if you look at the Master Systems display featured on the Enterprise B in Generations, you count 34 decks, and the deflector control room appears to be on deck 22. I guess they figured that was close enough for a ship that's not even the main ship in the movie. Anyway, moving on. Number 3, Transwarp Drive. Transwarp Drive. It wasn't actually a warp drive, it was some other kind of drive system. It just identified as a warp drive, and we know that because when they tried to fire it up, this happened.
Full power available.
No amount of rainbows could make up for it, and the Transwarp Drive had to be replaced. Okay, just a joke. Please don't cancel me. Star Trek's very inclusive. What actually happened was that the Transwarp Drive on the Excelsior was very promising in testing, but it was easy to sabotage. The Transwarp Drive on the original Excelsior was sabotaged by Scotty in Star Trek 3 so that Kirk could steal the Enterprise. It was also found to be unreliable, but Starfleet loved the Excelsior class design, so they replaced it with a standard warp drive that could still achieve warp 9.2 for 10 minutes.
Come on, come on. She'll fly apart. Fly her apart then.
In the Deep Space Nine technical manual, there is a reference to the Excelsior class having a 1500 Cochrane warp drive system, which would make the 24th century version of the ship over twice as fast as the original Excelsior. This is probably due to upgrades and refits. Number 4. The bridge was replaced. The original bridge that we see on the USS Excelsior in Star Trek III was huge. This was actually only a partial set, which means that they only built enough of the bridge for it to look good from this angle. If you move the camera to the right or left, you would just see the soundstage. We also get to see the idea of a more vast bridge in the concept art for the movie, where the bridge features a very large view screen, or perhaps it's a window. But the bridge was later replaced with a smaller one. Remember, Starfleet bridge modules are swappable. They can be removed and replaced. On the filming model, they actually changed the shape of the bridge to make it smaller. Here it is on the NX-2000 Excelsior, the prototype, and here it is on the NCC-2000 after it had entered service. I know it's hard to see because the photos aren't really sized correctly, but the NCC-2000 is smaller. The bridge we see in Star Trek The Undiscovered Country with the little tea table is a redress of the Enterprise A's bridge, with the con and ops stations borrowed from the Star Trek The Next Generation battle bridge. And another bridge in the same style was also rebuilt for the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations. Number 5. Holo Communicator. In Star Trek Deep Space Nine, we see an Excelsior class ship called the Malinke, and we find out that it has a Holo Communicator. But is that a big deal? I mean, haven't Holo Communicators been used in multiple galaxies for a long, long time?
And the Jedi?
The Chancellor should never have brought them into this. Kill them immediately.
But anyway, in Deep Space Nine, the Malinke had one, as did Benjamin Sisko on board the USS Defiant, and he was really excited about using it.
Open a channel to Captain Sanders on the Malinche.
Are you receiving my image, Captain?
Yes, and you?
You appear to be sitting on my bridge.
Now, Deep Space Nine was set in the late 24th century, but wasn't the Excelsior class from the 23rd century? Well, that brings me to our next point. Number 6. 100-year service life. Although the first Excelsior class ship was completed in 2272 and production on the Excelsior class ended in 2335, Excelsior class starships were still serving well into the 2370s. Excelsior class ships fought in the Battle of Wolf 359 and in Operation Return to retake Deep Space Nine. That means that this class of ship had an operational lifespan of over 100 years. Originally, Starfleet had proposed a 50-year operational life for the Excelsior class, and this isn't unheard of for a very successful design to operate for a very long time. Take the US Air Force's B-52 Stratofortress, for example. The plane made its first flight in 1952 and is still serving today, and it's expected to serve into the 2050s, which is 100 years. This is due to a strong original design coupled with upgrades and refits, just like the Excelsior class. Although in the later years, you do see a lot of Excelsior class ships getting destroyed in battle. Number 7. Defensive systems. The Excelsior class in its original form apparently had Type 5 phases. These were later upgraded to Type 8 phases at the time of the Enterprise B. For reference, the Enterprise E has Type 12 phases. The Type 8 phases on the Excelsior were mostly phaser turrets that fired from a single point, not a strip. The ship also carried photon torpedoes, and there were apparently 4 forward-facing torpedo launchers, although again, like with the Dex thing, I think they kind of made a mistake here. You see, in the movie Star Trek Generations, we see a shuttle exiting the ship through what is supposed to be an opening for a torpedo launcher. The other launcher is here, and it's the same on the other side for a total of 4. We even see 2 sets of launchers on either side in some of the cross-section diagrams. But I think it would make a lot more sense if the lower 2 round holes were torpedo launchers and the upper 2 square holes were shuttle bays. It just doesn't make sense that the Excelsior class would be that heavily armed. The Enterprise D, for example, just has one forward launcher and one rear-facing launcher. In Deep Space Nine, an Excelsior-class ship called the Lakota was also outfitted with quantum torpedoes and had its phasers and its warp drive upgraded. So we do know that they tried to upgrade the Excelsior class to keep them in line with other ships of the time. And the Lakota was even able to give the Defiant a run for its money. Number 8. Design changes. The design of the Excelsior class changed slightly over the years, and especially notable is that when we get to the Enterprise B, which was an Excelsior class ship in the movie Generations, they've added these fins to the left and right of the deflector dish. This was where deflector control was, where Kirk was sucked out into the Nexus after the energy ribbon struck the ship. The Lakota that was seen in Deep Space Nine was also of this altered design. Now, the reason for this change was that the producers of Star Trek Generations wanted a brand new ship, but the Next Generation TV show had already kind of established that the Enterprise B was an Excelsior class ship. Remember the little ship models in the observation lounge on the Enterprise D. So John Eaves and Michael Okuda came up with a way of making it new, but still essentially being an Excelsior class. They added those fins and extra impulse engines, and that's basically it. Number 9. Crew complement. The Excelsior class had a crew of 750, it could accommodate 150 visiting personnel, and had a total maximum of 9,800 people on board in an evacuation type scenario. That's according to statistics in the Deep Space Nine technical manual. On the USS Excelsior, Captain Sulu's quarters were on Deck 3, and this isn't like a Galaxy-class ship where everyone gets their own room. Many crew members actually had to share a room and they slept in bunks like this. Still better than serving on a Klingon ship.
You will sleep Klingon style. We do not soften our bodies by putting down a pad.
Anyway, let's move on to our 10th and final feature of the Excelsior class in Star Trek. Number 10. Saucer separation. Ah yes, like many ships in Starfleet, the Excelsior class could separate, but this wasn't a nice, clean Enterprise D style saucer separation where you use rejoining the ship as an initiation ritual for your new first officer.
Commander Riker will conduct a manual docking. Picard out. Sir?
No, separation for the Excelsior class was permanent, or perhaps should we say semi-permanent, because the ship could rejoin, but it would require a starbase or an orbital shipyard to put the ship back together. In addition, on the original design, the saucer section had no impulse engines, so it could only maneuver away from the engineering hull with RCS thrusters. Presumably, this would be kind of a last resort escape method in the event of a warp core breach. However, later versions of the Excelsior class, notably the Enterprise B and the Lakota, had these extra large impulse engines added to the saucer so it could use impulse drive in separated flight mode. But this means that there are now 4 impulse engines on the ship, 2 on the engineering hull and 2 on the saucer. On the Master Systems display that is in the background on the Enterprise B bridge in Star Trek Generations, we also do see a battle bridge which would be used to fly the engineering section in the event of a separation. Alright guys, that's the video for today. Please leave your comments below. What do you like about the Excelsior class? And what do you hate about it? A big thank you to Star Trek Fleet Command for sponsoring this video. If you're interested, do check out their game with the link below. And thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.